Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the tldm podcast, a shared world podcast of two D&D DMs talking to each other about the campaigns they run and play in that take place in the shared universe.
That's right. And we're going to actually take a dip into the player side of things for a moment here.
Because we're both players. Me, Tyler Samples.
And me, Alan Linick. Sorry, too eager over here. I rolled a 40 on initiative for this podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to very briefly, more brief than usual, I hope, do a campaign summary of where the East and West are at. And then we're going to briefly dive into Adventurers League, something we've both been dabbling in lately. Honestly, for me, as a result of our conversation with James, episode 16, James Amato of the One Shot RPG Network came to talk to us. And as a result of that conversation and some other conversations I've had with him, sort of realized that my perspective was pretty narrow in terms of the D&D community at large. Mm-hmm. Because aside from podcasts I listen to and the homebrew games that I play specifically with friends that I choose,
and who are improvisers.
And specifically, more often than not, are creative-y types. I didn't have any experience with, like, casual and or hardcore D&D gamers.
Yeah.
Especially not, like, official Wizards D&D content. So Tyler and I have both been going to Adventure League games.
Separately.
Yeah. But maybe, in the near future,
ideally,
together.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, and I did for similar reasons when we had our Twitter back and forth with James was what sparked me to be like, similarly, I need to broaden my horizons. Yeah. So I've been going for about a month, so I'm curious to talk about it. But first, let's talk recap.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the Western campaign, Rake has died.
Yikes.
I got to take over as my new character, whose name is Tau. It's an acronym. He is an old Warforged, but really, I mean, Warforged is the technical thing, but it's...
He's just a construct.
He's a construct. He's a helper robot. He's basically a bellboy.
Yeah.
And he has been helping out the party. Sheriff Boots, our de facto party leader, is really reeling. She's having, he, I should say, is having a pretty bad time. And Chelsea, his player, is letting it show. I'm curious. I think she wants... I'm not sure if she's trying to hang on to and rebound Sheriff, or if we're sowing the seeds for her to kind of retire him as a character.
Well, at the end of the last session, so Sheriff Boots, they went into this sort of sunken city underneath the waters of the swamp of Cassaday. And found in search of an artifact that's called the Prism of Cassaday that they were told is powering this wall of like necrotic force energy that is keeping it from the hands of the big bad. And they were told to go retrieve it for their discovered friend, possibly named Daisy, who is a Nothic who offered in exchange to give them the Deck of Many Things, which is something they've been looking for in one of my lazier plot mechanic points where I didn't bother dressing the Deck of Many Things up as anything other than just it's the Deck of Many Things, you probably want it. And in the process of attempting to achieve it, Rake died. And in our last session, because there is also some force that we now know, the last session ultimately became a lot of exposition dump in terms of explaining what's going on, because they met a guardian Naga inside the library of this sunken city.
Right.
Who explained, it helped them piece together that there is this necrotic force that is the prism of Cassaday has been kind of programmed, as it turns out, probably by Daisy before she became a Nothic, when her name was Falls of Fibley.
Ding ding. Reminder? Anyone remember that name?
Yeah. Who's a character from Alan's campaign. And
Yeah, that blew my mind, but everyone else was like, "Do we know this person?"
I know it was. I discovered it's very fun to put in Easter eggs solely for Alan's like
Yeah,
benefit.
because I freak out, and
yeah,
then
it's very entertaining.
yeah,
So in order to create this thing to keep the prism safe, it collects the souls or the death energy of magic users to power itself, and that is what is and has become sort of like a almost cannibalist, like it eats life force basically, or is attracted to it, and exists on the ethereal plane. And Sheriff Boots, whenever he occasionally gets pulled across dimensions by his patron, and that Chelsea had to leave early, and so said, my character Sheriff Boots bamfs off, which is kind of our word for going through, and I kind of had to hold myself to the rules I had made, which was anytime Sheriff Boots goes through, he has to make a Constitution save or get damaged by this like hive mind that exists of dead magic users, and he got ripped apart. So the session ended shortly thereafter, but so currently Sheriff's living or dead status is a big old fat question mark. Well, currently it's a solid check in the dead column, but whether that remains true going forward or not is TBA.
Yeah, and we're actually in an interesting crossroads of the party too, because Tyler, you set up we basically have two friends. And one is this big Naga, and the other one is Daisy, aka Falza. And both of them have told us just utterly contradicting information.
Yeah.
And we're now kind of stuck in a situation where we're like, well, shit. We probably are either going to have to fight one or the other, or like figure out which one of them is telling the truth. And I was actually talking to Jeff about it out of game, and we were both like, yeah, we have no idea what to do. So we're at a very sort of interesting moral crossroads.
Which was not completely planned, but is something I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
Which is always my favorite thing when I, through like my limited ability to like be interesting, managed to create something much more interesting than I could have planned for. Because like I know what is true and what's not, but so really it's by virtue of the fact of me not describing things as clearly as I could have created like a rich moral situation.
It is. It's an interesting. It's like that riddle where like Blorgans only tell lies and Snargans only tell the truth.
What question do you ask?
Right. And the answer is like, well, we didn't even know the rules about Blorgans and Snargans until 2 seconds ago.
Right.
And we've already been talking to them both at length, so now we don't know.
And
what
relying
the
on what they told us.
Yeah, and everything both of them have said has been vaguely true so far, so we don't know what to do. That said, Eastern Campaign is still chugging along this Activia storyline with a brief foray into the brain of Grundor, which we covered in another episode. I'm assuming they're going to come out chronologically, so you'll see it as episode 17.
Yeah.
That was a super fun session for me, and an interesting one in terms of just designing with another person, and especially designing with one of my players, and especially designing with someone who's never DM'd before.
Right.
I think a lot of times DMing is trial by fire, and I think as a DM, it is a good idea to introduce other people to DMing.
If only so that you can play at some point.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a fun situation like we have, where we get to sit at each other's tables and play 2 times a week. I know that's not feasible for a lot of people, and the designated DM oftentimes gets stuck in that role sometimes for years and years, based on what I've seen on Reddit communities. But anyway, with that session gone, the party has re-emerged from Grundor's mind and started making their way back to the Tapari Manor, the Danon Manor, where Activia's parents live. They have been given a new fancy item, because I just love handing out magical treasure.
It's the best.
It's my favorite. This one is an orb that appears to have some sort of connection to memories and the ethereal plane, which is like a dream plane. And The party along the way has returned the lady that they rescued from the woods, and also been reminded once more that they are definitely in a party with an active werewolf.
Right.
Sonny transformed, and they were forced to subdue him, which Activia did with some quick thinking by turning into a big fat wolf with polymorph and just alphaing him.
Yeah.
It was great.
Through some very generous largesse from her DM.
Yeah, well, it was just such a good idea that I felt like it needed to be rewarded.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I bent some rules and allowed her to polymorph into a monstrosity in the form of a winter wolf.
With an extra arm.
With an extra arm, because for flavor.
Basketball that she could throw at the wolf.
Yeah, which I'm sure plenty of people are balking at. But you know what? It's the game my players want, so I cater to them. And it was great. I gotta be honest, it was a super fun kind of cinematic moment. And then everyone crowded around him and beat him with sticks until he was unconscious and turned back, and they brought him home. And that's sort of where we left off. Their day trip is over, so this masquerade ball welcoming Activia, aka Noosa, into the family and taking her rightful place as the heir to this county is nigh. It's any day now.
Yeah.
But with all this new information and perhaps the reappearance of a presumed missing family member, things seem like maybe they're a little more complicated than that.
Yeah. It seems like we're going to have a lot of masked hijinks.
Yeah, there's going to be perhaps some actual physical masks. Spoiler alert, there are masks. I bought them a month ago.
They're assumed
in
completely.
My D&D box.
That's great. I can't wait for that.
Also, spoiler alert, I am currently rustling up some guest players who are like experienced D&D people that I'm going to feed rumors and information to, who will be at the party for you guys to interact with.
That's great. Are you allowed to say who they are?
The only one I'm 90% sure will be there. It's kind of scheduling permitting for all of them. The only one I'm 90% sure will be there will be Anthony LeBlanc, who is one of the heads of the training center at Second City and an avid gamer and dungeoneer.
Yeah, that's really fun.
So he will be playing a visiting noble from a far-off land.
Awesome.
Who's here to celebrate Activia's name day.
That's great. Noosa's name day.
Noosa, excuse me. Yeah, her actual name day as Noosa.
Yeah.
So that's the campaigns in a nutshell. We wanted to talk about, speaking of James D'Amato, we wanted to talk about the Dungeon Dome and our experiences thereon. But first, let's chat Adventurers League.
Yeah. So, Alan, who'd you play?
My character, I actually brought two because I figured that erroneously figured that people would tend towards casters.
Yeah, I know.
And I was like, well, I'll bring I wanted to play a wizard because I've never really played one before.
Sure.
But I also I'll try a dex fighter. I was like, I'll try a dex fighter and see if my table is like caster heavy, then I'll do the other one. And it turns out it was like a war cleric, a ranger, a fighter, a barb, and a druid. So I was like, damn, I might as well just play my wizard. So I did.
Yeah.
And I was taken aback. Another of the guys at the table with me was also a first-time Adventurers Leaguer. And my expectations, just from kind of chatting with you and talking to James D'Amato on episode 16, my expectations were kind of in this realm of like, yeah, these are people who are trying to keep their characters alive, who are used to rotating tables and not necessarily playing with the same people over and over again. And who the end goal is to progress, right? We're talking about like gaining experience, gaining magical items, gaining equipment, gaining gold, that sort of thing. So I was like, that's where my expectations were at. And that was pretty much what happened. The game goes so fast too. I don't know if that was your experience. My one game.
I have the gaming table that I've been playing at basically every week has somebody who's new to D&D. So no, but the people who have played before are I mean, it's faster than it is playing in one of our games because it's like the people who know what they're going to do. Sometimes I find that super annoying. Like, it sounds like you didn't have any rogues in your...
No, probably the closest rogue, like AWOL player to the normal archetype was me. Because a lot of it was like hand wave narrated to fit the module. So it's like, you're going down these tunnels, you're in the sewers. And I was like, well, what's down the left tunnel? And everyone was like, who cares? And I was like, but there's a tunnel here. Like, what shouldn't we?
We should explore.
Yeah, and the DM was like, and kudos to him, he did great. The DM was like, oh, it's a dead end, and I was like, oh, okay. So we basically did a lot of like traveling and exposition, like very quickly.
Yeah.
At the top of it, with very little like active player engagement. That's a different way to play than what I normally do. And all our encounters were on a mat. I don't know if that's happens at your table.
It depends. I only once because it was like a big battle, but the other stuff has been in. I've only played 3 or 4 times, and 2 of those times have been sort of the introductory session of the one was a yawning portal sort of drop in and play one because of the party composition. That's just what was available, and then like the first session of the Tombs of Annihilation season.
Got it.
So neither of those really required a map because it was so new session wise. So
yeah, it was just different. It was very different.
Yeah.
There was,
Oh, and the reason that I brought up rogues was I was playing one of the sessions there. We had 2 rogues and that were both range fighters, and so every turn it would be I go out, I shoot, I run back, I hide, and so like they wouldn't shoot unless they had advantage from hiding. But it was at some point I was like, they fucking know where you are. Like you can only hide so many times and shoot from the same general area. Where somebody like I understand that mechanically it's possible, but this is lame. Like this is lame to spend every turn being like, and then I go back and hide because it's like you're being lame. Just like do stuff. Stop like trying to squeak out every mechanical advantage you can for your attacks. Like do cool stuff.
Yeah, that happened to us a couple of times too. Like I put a couple of guards to sleep. I put like 3 guards to sleep with a high roll and sleep spell, and we were trying to escape from this like garden, and the hatch. I like opened the hatch, and then I was like, "All right, here we go, we're escaping." And they were like, "Well, we got to kill these guards," and I was like, "Why? They're asleep."
Yeah.
And it was like it was like I don't know if it was like a XP thing or just like, but there's things on the mat. I don't know what it was, but they were like, no, we're gonna kill the guards, and I was like, all right, so we just stayed and killed the guards, and it was fine.
Sure.
But I was like, all right, well, I didn't quite understand like. Thinking of it in terms of like from a character perspective of like they're out, like they're just because they're breathing doesn't mean we didn't win. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was a moment, and then there was some role play. There was like a role play section in it that I was like, ooh, this is gonna be interesting and fun because we were in this town that hated non-humans, so we all basically disguised ourselves as people.
What was your race?
I'm playing a hobgoblin wizard.
Ooh.
Which is super fun. And so we disguised ourselves and we were looking for this document, and I was like, oh man, so if we distract these guys, I can like slide my familiar out of my pocket and like get it to go look around. But the module wasn't really built for that kind of like level of interactivity.
Yeah.
So it was basically like if we all made checks and if someone passed the check properly, we just spotted the thing we were looking for.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, this like there's an opportunity here to have so much more like cinematically going on, or like so many more opportunities for us to like really play the moment. That I was surprised by how much got boiled down to dice rolls, honestly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's very video gamey.
It was.
Sometimes. I mean, it depends on the table and the DM and even what particular module and stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
And like honestly, also how much time they had to prepare.
Yeah.
But,
and all that said, like I feel like everything I've said so far sounds kind of complainy. But all that said, like the guys at my table were great. Like they were fun, cool dudes. And like one guy was playing a rogue in like a tanuki suit, effectively.
That's awesome.
Which was hilarious. There was a lizard folk druid who couldn't tell like if you were a mammal, he couldn't tell you apart from any other mammals.
That's fun.
Which was fun to like play off of because he kept calling me goblin, which got under my craw.
Sure.
and then they're like so all that other stuff being said of like kind of like shocking me out of what I'm used to when I think about playing. I had a good time, and I'm planning on going back. So
That's great.
yeah, it's just different.
Yeah,
just different.
I agree. I'm gonna go play right after we record. So I'm enjoying myself in it as well with my half elf. Or no,
Yeah, what's your guy like?
I'm an Aasimar Arch-Fey warlock.
Sweet.
Specifically, I'm a cobbler. I'm a really good
Wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm a shoemaker.
I'm
like a
So
really.
you're like a classic like Scandinavian elf.
So no, I'm an Aasimar. I'm not.
All right. Oh, so you're not like a Keebler or like a cobbler.
No. So what it is I have invented. I invented sneakers. As my character, and it's my patron is this archfey forced me into patronage, and demanded the world's best pair of shoes, and that's what I'm on, like out trying to find materials for making his shoes.
Like godly shoes.
Yeah, very godly shoes. So I'm just playing it as like I don't know about the Aasimar stuff because it doesn't come in until level 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like some like kind of bratty dude who's just like mainly all about having a good time. Because I was like, I really don't want to play edgelord at all, of like having like a dark brooding backstory, and I want to play a character who is just good natured and like charming to the other people at like the other characters at the table, just to force people to like me. And like so I just do a lot of like shit, yeah, like, and just like basically I'm just playing a skateboarder. But you want to know, Alan, what I've had a lot of fun playing?
I think I already know.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun playing Quiddle P. Don June, one of 2 members of the Don June Entertainment Management Group.
Yep.
How did you feel about it?
Yeah, so that's our tag team. Our tag team partnership, professional wrestling dungeon blasting experience that we had on the Dungeon Dome, which is it's a blast. First of all, it was a blast. I will you know what? I'll pump it right now.
Yeah,
guys, check out the Dungeon Dome.
Yeah,
our friend of the show, Dames, help me.
Dames Jamato,
friend of the show, runs the Dungeon Dome. I think normally on Wednesdays, but with some Saturdays sprinkled in there. I'll double check the schedule and post a link down in the description for you all. But it is a phenomenal concept, and I think executed very well.
I do too.
It's a two teams of 2, so 2 tag teams in what is essentially like a professional wrestling style Dungeons and Dragons head-to-head experience. But the matches usually revolve around some sort of like score or task or point system that prevents it from just being like 2 sets of player characters fighting on each other until they die. And the thing that makes it most interesting is that because it is a live stream done on Twitch, the audience gets to participate and kind of like affect the course of the match through the use of cheer and donations and stuff. So much like the Hunger Games, you can send in items or like kind of like adjust points. Adjust dice rolls and stuff.
It's great. And of course, Alan, also who did you play in our tag team?
So what's Quiddle's deal?
Quiddle Don June is one of the original shareholders in the Don June Dome, as he insists on calling it, before he was forced out due to charges of racketeering, and after having been exonerated due to the unexplained deaths of some witnesses, he has formed a new company. It's coming back as a combatant in the Dungeon Dome, the Don June Dome, to try to reclaim it from within, specifically to claim ownership of the dome and all participants. And he is doing that with the help of his declared heir and henchman, Cairo Khan.
Yep. Cairo Khan is a bugbear barbarian, or as the audience lovingly referred to him, a bugbarian.
Uh-huh.
Which is a great pun. and I don't even like puns that much.
That's not true. You love puns.
I like doing puns. I rarely like my own puns or other people's puns.
I see. You don't enjoy the output. You enjoy the process.
I do. I think words are fun.
Yeah.
But puns rarely do it for me.
Yeah.
This one did it for me. We also, I will say, just as a weird self-congratulatory thing, we did develop our own hashtag as well.
Yeah, we picked up some hashtag following throughout the game.
The hashtag that stuck throughout the match was corporate enforcement, which is rad.
Yeah, and we also had hashtag I own the dome, which I thought was pretty fun as well.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so basically we're
Heels.
basically playing, we're heels. We're sort of robber barons coming in using force and brute connivingness to try to put into effect like a monopoly. Basically, we're just like gross capitalism attempting to exert its presence, and people ate it up.
It was fun. I would love to actually break down, so not just to describe sort of what it felt like, but also to talk about experience-wise and mechanically what it was like. Because I don't know about you, I played on a mat before, I played on a grid before. I've never played on that extensive a set before.
Yeah.
It had walls and like height and dimensions, and everything was like
it was
painted.
Modeled out.
Yeah, it was like it was real kitted out. And we had like little figures that looked like our guys,
which was great,
which was cool. And as you probably know if you listen to the show, we run a more theater of the mind style game. So having the kind of tactical options and like physical representation of stuff was very different for me.
Same. I've never actually played on a mat before. Not consistent. Well, really never, because I've always been mostly the DM. And I have a battle map and stuff that I certainly could use, but I just don't care to, because combat, like the mechanical elements of combat aren't what like turn my gear as a DM, so it's just not something that I have invested in. But yeah, so it was super interesting playing that. Also, just because I was like, yeah, I'm bad at tactics and like resource management when it's actually being applied, because I haven't had to actually like think through it. Which is the other thing with Adventurers League stuff is like what I'm treating it as now is like my D&D gym of being like, oh, this is where I need to like learn how to be better about things of like conserving, like managing my movement speed and like using it towards specific outcomes, and like being aware of my like, you know, like my
if something can reach you and stuff like that. Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun playing it. I mean, we won.
We did, by very barely.
Yeah.
Literally everyone died.
Yeah. Including you.
Everyone.
While you made the winning blow.
That's right. I actually, we're kind of conversely discovered that I guess I have like a knack for tactics.
That doesn't surprise me.
I guess in retrospect doesn't really surprise me either, but because a lot of the games I play outside of tabletop RPGs are like kind of tactically focused games.
Right.
But it was my first time kind of bringing that to the D&D side, and it was really fun getting to create like special moves using James's inspiration system, which he sort of talked about when he was on with us.
Which was even cooler than what he had described.
It's something that I
blast.
might actually just make a thing.
Yeah.
I might make a more liberal, be more liberal with how inspiration is awarded and how much I hand out, and basically use the same system.
Yeah,
because it was great.
And I like have the temptation to describe it, but really, honestly, you should just watch the Dungeon Dome and like engage with James on Twitter if you have more questions about it, because he's a lovely person who would absolutely talk to you about it. But he has like a proprietary system of inspiration that was just like a blast to play, because it enables. It's sort of like I think 4th edition had action points, and like that mechanic that kind of evolved into inspiration in 5th edition. He's got a more mechanically complicated but like satisfying levels of like what you can do based on the amount of inspiration you have. That's just enables a lot of like
cool shit
and like cool character, like player interaction with the DM's world.
Yeah, and it was cool to see. One of the things in particular is that if you spend a certain amount of inspiration points, you can alter the environment of the ring. And that was a game changer for me, because doing it is one thing, or like flavor text is often how that gets translated to in Theater of the Mind style games. But having that happen and having it physically change the board in front of you and have that physical change have impact on what is available to you or capable your character's capable of is huge. So like toppling a pillar means, yeah, cool, you crushed two things, but now because that pillar's down there, it's going to eat up your movement in a different way to get around it or over it. Similarly, you can I like knocked a wall down so that I could use it as cover, which was awesome, but then now like I found myself stuck in a position where I was like, shit, I can't like climb over the wall and engage with somebody.
Right.
So that was all really fascinating too, to like feel more tangible effects is something I'm not used to.
And be able to like easily see at a glance, see the state of affairs. It was like, oh, I see why people like battle mat stuff for combat.
It was great.
And like models specifically of like being able to see. It was interesting at one point. The question was like, can I see them? And it was adjudicated based on sightline for the model. Like, can this character model, like, can I see its eyes from this angle? Yes, then it probably can see. And that was an interesting experience of like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was very neat.
Yeah.
And it was interesting having like a goal with angles, like multiple angles to it too. So like the goal for our match was whoever kills the most skeletons, whichever team kills the most skeletons wins. Pretty simple. But the question then becomes, do we want to race them by killing skeletons, or do we want to try to target them as players and knock them out so that they can't kill skeletons?
Right, because we also had the secondary goal, which was James had asked us to play heals.
Right.
So it was also like, how do we frustrate the other team as much as possible as well?
And like role play the heal side.
Yeah, and that was what was interesting, I think, and what like muddied the like tactical side of it for me was because I kept being like, there are two elements of it of like, how do I best win? But also like, how do I best heal this match? Led to like me making like less good choices because I was like, I just want to like try to like do an annoying thing to the other players just to be like, yeah, see, like, which was very entertaining. And like, if we ever play again, I think will be something where I will like try to tactically be as much of a heel as possible, and like while still like trying to win.
Yeah, it was interesting because it was a completely different mindset. Both of these experiences, Adventures League and Dungeon Dome, not to in any way like lump them together,
right?
But they were both very different experiences than what I have come to associate with 5th edition, which is really honestly a testament again to how malleable this like rules book is, because it really does lend itself to like however you envision or want to make the game look, you can do that. And barring actual book stuff, there's plenty of room to make your own mechanics and invest in that.
Yeah, which is interesting because a thing I've seen a few times on like Reddit and other forums is people will sometimes ask like, how do I change the rules to do this, or like I want to play this kind of game, and sometimes the conversation will kind of devolve to the point where it's like, well, you just shouldn't use D&D because D&D is ultimately a combat simulator, because that's where the majority of the rules are focused. Like it's not a great social simulator because D&D, like the rules, the mechanics behind social interactions are maybe 3 pages. Whereas the rules for like combat simulation, it's like 75 to 80 pages. If you include spells and stuff. And it is interesting to think about, A, that being true and, how much you let that affect it, but B, of like, part of it is because you don't need, like, social situations, you shouldn't need as many mechanics for them. You should be able, or like, you shouldn't need one-size-fit-all mechanics for those. Like, those you should just make up and build based on your player dynamics and what's fun for them, as opposed to, like, what seems arbitrary, like, the arbitrary objective truth of how, like, bartering works or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think suffice it to say, as you said, playing these other modules of 5e has been ultimately exciting just to expand the world of what it's like as a player. And then, as we talked about with James in the last episode, of just sort of like how that can influence your DMing and vice versa. And I think getting a lot of experiences at a table that's not yours ultimately broaden what you can do at your table, which is hopefully is the goal of being a DM, is increasing your palette of moves and storytelling abilities and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's easy to fall in anything, easy to fall into routines, and actively seeking out different kinds of tables and experiences has kind of helped me like think in different terms. So like yeah, just like the grungeon idea of like bringing James in, Dugan, that is. I've got to differentiate between my Jameses.
Yeah.
Bringing Dugan in to sort of co-DM the session from the player side is something that I doubt I would have thought of if I didn't like try to keep myself open to other sort of experiences through like the media I consume and like the other people I play with and stuff like that. Planning this masquerade that I intend on having some guests at, that's something that like maybe wouldn't have occurred to me otherwise.
Right.
And now thinking in terms of like, yeah, I can make like tactical kind of spatial situations maybe. How can I fold that in my games? How can I like incorporate elements from maybe things that I like from AL into the games? Yep. You know, they do make use of, you know, gold matters, downtime days matter, that sort of thing. And that's something that I think I skip over a lot.
Same. Completely. Oh, yeah. And one thing I do want to say before I forget is, you know, we're talking about like go out and play with other people and stuff like that. But as Alan pointed out earlier, you know, we have the luxury of we live in a fairly large city and we have a large community that we can kind of pull from to be able to play the games that we're interested in playing and explore new ones. But don't be dissuaded if you're in a place where, you know, you are that person that's been a 20-year DM because you only have 3 people that will play with you because you live in a town of 200 and, you know.
Or you only have 3 friends.
You know, feel free to like embrace side quests and embrace like the ability to be like, you know, this week I'm going to do an adventure zone style campaign mission, just like what happened with the Grungeon was doing a very different style of D&D session because there was context that you presented to the players that they could buy into. Mm-hmm. And that's really all you need is like get people to agree to play differently just for a session and present that as like it's a fun like a sneak peek or like
it's like an opportunity, right?
Yeah, it's like a fun surprise and try out the shit that you otherwise don't feel like comfortable doing. Yeah, just make it work for you. Anyway, though, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm excited to get back to, because there's a weird tangible sense of progress and like collecting stuff that I'm enjoying, at least, or have enjoyed from my one AL game so far. And that's something I'm not used to, is kind of like showing up for myself.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because we talked about that in a previous episode, and it kind of came back up again with James D'Amato. This idea of like playing for the table and playing with a group. And playing AL for me, at least so far, and maybe we'll touch base on this again in a future episode. Playing AL for me so far is much more of a personal driven thing, because although I expect to see a lot of the same people again next time around, odds are pretty good that they'll be playing either different characters or at different tables in unconnected modules. So the only constant is in this endeavor is me, and my guy, if he lives, and the stuff that I kind of accrue and the progress that I make. So it is more of a kind of, you describe it as like a video gamey sort of effect, and I think I agree with that sentiment in that it wholly revolves around my input as a player rather than being a kind of story by committee or like game by committee or art by committee.
Ooh, TM, copyright.
Look it up. It's a book. Don't buy it. It's not that good.
No, don't. It's not worth reading.
No. The DVD is also not very good that it comes with. Anyway, that's a total. So we're gonna edit all that out. Maybe.
No, we're not. I have to pee.
All right. But that is interesting too to kind of like broaden my perspectives and think a little more on like where the personal aspect of this fits in and deriving enjoyment from that, because I am, and it's just a different way to play and I mean, let's just say this over and over and over again, but it's just always going to be true, is that you, as a DM, it's your job to cater to the players. And there obviously will be some middle ground in there, because you need to derive enjoyment from the game as well, or else you're working. Like it shouldn't feel like work. It may take a lot of time and effort, but it should feel like fun. But that said, there's no wrong way to approach the game. There's ways that work for the tables you're at and ways that don't, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to keep going, and probably in the near future, you and I will sit down at an AL table together
and destroy
see what that's like. Yeah, we'll just bring those Don June boys in there and fuck shit up.
That would be a blast.
I mean, they're only level 3, so we could easily respec within the rules to do that.
Yeah.
That said, Tyler, any closing thoughts, parting shots before we go? You got a D&D-ism for us?
I do. I do. I've been sitting on this one for a while. And it's this. Alan, fighters and rangers can two-handed fight, but that doesn't mean that they're the only ones allowed to. It just means they're the only ones good at it. If you find yourself in that situation, put up both dukes and pray for the best.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah.